Ahoy folks, and welcome back to Broadside Gaming with me, Zug. So, it is day 2 of Nightmares and Visions, which means the builds are slightly more refined. We've had a lot more time to test, and if you saw last night's live stream, Ugg and I basically did quite a lot of testing on them. So, if you want to see that, go check out the live stream. But today, we have another heavy hitter build for you, so let's jump in and see what we've got. I am going to give you a few different weapon options, as this build is quite interchangeable, so you're not stuck just using the Delver's pickaxe if you don't like it. We also can change the ranged weapon, so don't worry about that. I will get to that at the end. But for the moment, this is what we're using. So, the Delver's pickaxe, and the modifiers are damage, cleave damage, crowd control, and penetration. Lol. And the dump stat is defense, because defense is not as useful as everyone seems to think it is. You basically don't need it. So, think of it like this. You're not a tank from 2006 World of Warcraft. You don't need to be def capped. You take a lot less damage if you can kill something in one swing as opposed to 2 or 3. So if it's dead, it can't hurt you. Alright? So just think of it like that. Dead enemies do no damage. So stack damage. It's a lot better for you. Yes, you still need to block, dodge, and do all that lovely things, and parry and all that sort of stuff. But it's not doing as much for you as you think it is. It really isn't. Anyway, perks. We're going with plus 25% damage to carapace armored enemies to help deal with maulers and crushers. You can basically one-hit them with this. And we're going with flak armor because it's the most prevalent armor type in the game. And this will help you scythe through massive crowds. Blessings-wise, we're sticking with Slaughterer and Thrust for the moment. I have tested this out with Slaughterer and Headtaker and Thrust, but this still seems to be the sweet spot for the Delver's pickaxe, at least, as Thrust stacks up ridiculously quickly, and with our ability to weave in light attacks now and not lose, damage, Slaughterer is basically always at 5 stacks if you're fighting, obviously. Next up, we have the Ripper Gun. I am not 100% sold on the modifiers for this, so there may be changes. At the moment, range is the dump stat, but we may change that to either ammo or possibly stability. Ammo will make the least difference to how the gun works, but obviously you have less shots, so you're doing less damage and whatnot. But it is a terrible gun at range, so reducing range kind of only highlights how bad it is at range, but then again, you're not trying to snipe this weapon. You are stabbing stuff with this and basically hosing it into crowds. But as I said, might change. So don't take this for gospel on the modifiers. Perk-wise, though, Maniac and Unyielding, because Unyielding on the ranged weapon is very useful for the Ogryn, especially if you can't get a decent angle on what you're trying to fight. Say, a Beast of Nurgle. You don't want to go face-to-face with it. If you can't get around behind it, it is always good to step back and just hose it down with your ranged weapon. And Maniac, because if you need to snap off a shot at a netter, you want to make sure you are trying to kill them in as few shots as possible. Blessings-wise, we're going with Can Opener because it's ridiculously powerful. Hitting an enemy with the special attack gives them 16 stacks of 2.5% brittleness, debuff lasting 5 seconds, and can have a maximum of 16 stacks. So basically, hit them once, it has the maximum stacks. Brittleness, if you don't already know, because Fat Sharks seem to love naming things really dumb titles, is just rending that you apply to a target. Rending is applied to you as a passive buff. Brittleness is a debuff you apply to an enemy. But it does the same thing. It's just how it's applied. And the last but not least, we have Blaze Away, because why not? It's just strength as we keep firing. So, I will demonstrate what I mean about brittleness. So how you apply it is you use your special action button, whatever that is. And now the Crusher has a huge amount of rending applied to it. And you can quite happily just tear it apart with the gun. Or if you want to, switch to your melee and beat it up some more. But the range on this thing is quite bad. And even more so because we've dumped it out on the modifier. So don't expect to be able to make any sweeping, sniping, 360 no-scope shots of this. Up close, though, it is absolutely terrifying. And also, they've, increased the reload speed and the pull-out time and all that sort of thing, so it doesn't feel like such a chore using this weapon. As for the Curios, exactly the same as before with a slight change. So we're still using the max health and 2 toughness, but we're now using 5% toughness, 12% stamina regeneration, and 20% damage resistance to gunners. And the 2 toughness Curios are still twinned, with plus 5% toughness, 4% combat ability regeneration, and 20% damage resistance to gunners. If you are having trouble with snipers, you can take off 1 or 2 if you're feeling spicy of the damage resistance gunners and stick damage resistance snipers on. I just prefer the damage resistance to gunners. And yes, I'm well aware this does not equal 60% damage resistance to gunners. There are diminishing returns, and this equals out to about 43% with all 3 stats. So that is the gear. Let's take a look at the talents. So we have got Heavyweight, plus 30% damage against Bulwarks, Crushers, Plague Ogrins, and Reapers, and also receive plus 30% damage reduction against the same. Into Smash 'em, replenish 5% toughness after hitting a single enemy with a melee attack. Increase to 15% if it's a heavy attack. And then into the Best Defense, replenish 5% toughness after hitting multiple enemies with a melee attack, or 15 with a heavy. Into Toughness Boost, and then we're picking up Frag Bomb. I just prefer the Frag Bomb. It's very, very useful. But any of the Blitz abilities are a perfectly good choice if you prefer them. So pick whichever one you want and go with that. They're all good. They just do slightly different things. Then into Toughness Damage Reduction, and then into Payback Time, plus 15% damage for 5 seconds after a successful dodge or being hit by an attack. Then into Soften Them Up. Enemies damaged by your melee attacks take 15% more damage for 5 seconds. Into Focused Fighter, plus 4% damage resistance from melee attacks on a successful attack. Stacks up to 5 times. Stacks are removed if you take a melee attack. Into Toughness Damage Reduction, and then we're taking Indomitable. Charge forward with great force, knocking back enemies and staggering them, gain plus 25% attack speed and 25% movement speed for 5 seconds. Charge is stopped on collision with a monstrosity or if you press the back button. Indomitable also classes as you are dodging while you're using it, so you can launch yourself into gunners now and you will dodge the shots instead of being hosed down. Then we have Stomping Boots, replenish 10% toughness per enemy hit. And then Pulverize, apply 5 stacks of bleed on enemies hit by Indomitable. Bleed is still incredibly powerful. Dot damage in this game is still wildly overtuned, which is great for us. So this is also helping with damage and survivability because we are taking Batter and we are also taking Delight and Destruction. Now we're taking the Rending Boost into Beat Them Back, plus 15% melee damage on successful heavy melee attack. Into Crunch, up to 15% damage bonus and 30% impact bonus to your charged melee attacks based on the charge time. I have had reports from viewers that this is actually 30% damage bonus. I haven't been able to verify it myself, but a lot of people have said this is actually at 30%, not 15%. So do with that as you will. Then we're taking Strike True for plus 10% melee weak spot strength. Into Batter to inflict 2 stacks of bleed on melee hit, increased it to 4 on heavy melee hit. And then we're taking Slam for the impact bonus on melee attacks. Stagger an enemy with a melee attack replenishes 5% stamina and has a 1-second cooldown. And we're also taking Brutish Strength, which is giving us 4 stacks of brittleness on push. Now, there are actually a lot of talents in this tree which are giving us rending and brittleness. When if you combine all of them together, it's actually quite a big stealth damage upgrade. So as you can see, we are picking up all of the rending that we can at the moment. And this seems to be increasing the output exponentially. Then we have Melee Damage Boost for melee damage. Into Toughness Boost for plus 25% toughness. Bruiser, 100% ability cooldown regeneration for 3 seconds after you or an allied coherency kill an elite enemy. And last but not least, into the Heavy Hitter section. We're taking Frenzied Blows plus 2.5% melee attack speed on chained hit for 5 seconds, stacking 5 times. Then we're taking Dominate for plus 10% rending for 10 seconds on elite kill. Delight in Destruction, which is our defense, which is giving us plus 8% damage resistant per bleeding enemy in melee range for stacking 4 times. Heavy Hitter, plus 3% melee damage for 7.5 seconds on melee attack hit, stacks 8 times, and gain 2 stacks on heavy attack. into just getting started, while heavy hitter is at 8 stacks, gain 10% attack speed. And last but not least, Great Cleaver, heavy hitter also grants 15% cleave for each stack, which is pretty wild. If we had one leftover point, I would be putting it into Don't Feel a Thing, but at the moment we don't. If I can work it that we do, this is where the last point will go. So, we have an awful lot of damage and rending in this build, which is allowing us to do very silly things. Like that. Also, this is the Carsolos pickaxe, the weakest of the three, but it basically acts like a Branks with this kind of build. But it is giving us the bonus of being able to have lots and lots of cleave with it. As you can see, most of the attacks are big, wide sweeps. And with Crunch and Thrust and Slaughterer, and basically everything else, is just giving us ridiculous amounts of damage. But you can go into an overhead strike by using the special attack, which is Pull, and then straight into a heavy strike. Or, as you will find a lot more useful, the block push, which is now giving us lots and lots of brittleness. So you will be wanting to use the push a lot more. Does usually go into an overhead strike if I can actually make the damn thing work, which sometimes I can't. Like that. So, that is the general build. I did promise we would give you some more weapon options, so here they are. So, there's the Carsolos pickaxe, and if you want, you could use the slab shield. If you want some more defense, you can use it like this. Defense is the dump, with Carapace and Flak as the perks, Skull Crusher and Opportunist as the blessings. This is giving us even more rending, and it's giving us more stacks of damage. If that's not your cup of tea, you can always use one of the bully clubs. I prefer the Mark 3B. Dump stat again is defense, perks, Flak and Carapace, blessings. This is actually a very powerful weapon again. This used to be the meta about a year ago, and then it got nerfed. It's not quite the meta now, but it is pushing back up into sort of A tier, low S. So blessings-wise, Skull Crusher, target receives 4 stacks of plus 10% damage if already staggered. You will be staggering basically everything. And Thunderous hitting an enemy gives them 4 stacks of 2.5% brittleness. Debuff lasts for 5 seconds. This is giving you even more brittleness, so you're basically stripping away any defense the enemies have against you. And now, Paul the Power Maul is back. It is actually useful again. It's not quite as good as the others, but it is very, very usable. At the moment, I'm using Flak and Maniac. You can change a Maniac for Carapace if you want to. And blessings-wise, Opportunist and Skull Crusher. I'm still a bit about the heavy attack pattern of this weapon. It's not super useful. But with a light attack, you can do a nice overhead strike. You just can't really overhead strike with the heavy attacks. But as we're not locked to only heavy attacks now, that isn't as much of a disadvantage as it used to be. But all rejoice, Paul the Power Maul is back. Now, ranged weapons. If the Ripper is not your thing, you can also go for the Grenade Gauntlet, which has been improved. I still don't like it, but that's just my personal preference. Modifiers, I've dumped out ammo. You could probably dump out melee damage for this. Melee damage is probably the better dump stat for this. I think that is my actual one I'm using. Perk-wise, Maniacs and Flak, because I use this to snipe out Maniacs. Blessing-wise, Pinpoint Targeting is still very good, and Glory Hunter just to be able to farm max some toughness. Or you've got the tried and true Kickback. Range is still my dump, because this thing, as far as I know, still has infinite range because they just never bothered changing it. Yeah, it's still ridiculous. If you can see it, you can basically kill it. I mean, you're not going to one-shot anything with it, but you're sniping with a shotgun. I think it's about as best as we can hope for. With this at the moment, I'm using Full Bore and Blaze Away with Unyielding and Flak, mostly because I do use the ranged weapon to deal with unyielding targets if I can't get a good angle on them. And of course, we have the Rumbler. Now, this isn't completely sorted yet. I am still testing the blessings on this, but Carapace Unyielding seemed to be a good way to go. I've dumped out Mobility because everything else is quite useful. And for the blessings, Adhesive Charge is just incredibly good still. And Shrapnel just to help with spreading around those bleeds. And Bleed is still very, very powerful. The only problem is it does have quite low ammo. But you can stick grenades to Ogrins, which is hilarious in my books. And it is very good if you are getting surrounded, you can just fire at the floor. And stagger a crowd to give yourself a few seconds. Or of course just fire it in something's face. So there you go, folks. That is today's edited heavy hitter build. I do hope you enjoy it. And if you do, please do like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications. It really does help us out. And I shall see you all for the next one. So until then, take it easy, and I'll see you later.